Duchenne muscular dystrophy, DMD, is an X-linked recessive mutation that affects approximately 1 in 3,500 boys in the United States. DMD affects a particular muscle membrane protein called dystrophin, and individuals with DMD suffer from the deterioration of skeletal and cardiac muscles, progressively worsening, leading to early death in late adolescence or early 20s. Throughout the course of Physci 121, we have had a multitude of experts in this field discussing the multidisciplinary aspect of DMD care. However, we did not have the opportunity to hear the parents' perspective on DMD and how their individual experience was with the multidisciplinary aspect of DMD. Thus, for our final project, we decided to interview two individuals, Evrim Addis from Muscular Dystrophy Association and Ellen Wagner from Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy.
My name is Evrim Atas. So I started to work for MDA back in November. So I'm kind of new in the MDA too. So by training, I'm a chemist actually, but I worked in the biomedical engineering and biomedical field for a while. My expertise was more in next generation sequencing technologies and using it to for diagnostics and making biosensors. Yeah, and I also have a kid with Duchenne. So that's why I was always very passionate about, I've been following the field and trying to somehow get involved. I was involved with some foundations before on a volunteer basis. But then finally this past year, I was like, I'm just gonna try to switch.
I'm Ellen Wagner, and I work with PPMD. Prior to working for PPMD, I volunteered for many years. I had a son with Duchenne who passed away 4 years ago, and he was about 19. So I've been in the space for, I mean, my son would have been diagnosed like in 22 years ago. So I've been in the space for a long time, very active, doing advocacy. My son was in a clinical trial, and now I work for a Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy.
That's
At
really
MDA,
cool.
yeah, I work. I'm the director, one of the directors for research portfolio. So we overlook. We basically fund a lot of research, from academia to companies. We have different programs, and I just look over them. Obviously, there's a VP of research, and so it's good that I get to see all these grants or these ideas that either we fund or not. It's just great to see those as a scientist too. So I learned that actually MDA doesn't advertise that much other than their website. So we don't really put out RFAs, meaning that it's a RFA stands for research. It's kind of an advertisement that's saying that we are looking for research projects for this specific area. So far, I think MDA hasn't done that a lot, but we usually, so whatever comes related to, anything in MDA's portfolio, anything diseases that are listed or there, anybody can apply. But majority of our grants go to academic institutions or research institutions. There's a program called MVP, which we kind of try to invest in small companies like startups.
Work for the care team, and we are involved in, we have been historically involved in writing the care considerations that were written in conjunction with the CDC, with the Centers for Disease Control, and then working on the rewrite with the Centers for Disease Control. We've established a clinical care network that is certified by PPMD. We have 29 clinics across the country now that are certified. Prior to that, there was no basic requirements in any clinic. So if you went in to receive care, the care varied greatly across the country. So UCLA is one of those clinics. And we also do a lot of triage with our community. Because it's a rare disease, you can't just walk into an emergency room and expect that the people caring for you understand the implications of the disease or the medications or treatments that the child might be undertaking. So we do a lot of triage where we get calls, messages, not me so much because I'm not clinical, but the clinical people I work with, in the middle of the night or on the weekends, what do we do? And we send them to the right people. We send information. We have a lot of emergency information that we can send for them to show to ER docs. We can put the ER docs at any time of the day or night in touch with somebody that can give them the information that they need.
Gotcha.
So, and that's a common issue with rare disease. So his name was Tim, and I have an older son. And when Tim was born, right away, I knew he was not like his brother. Like, he didn't hold his head, he didn't hold his body the same way. And probably at like his 2-month checkup, I said something to the pediatrician, like, he just isn't like his brother. And the pediatrician's like, well, every kid's different, you know, like, what do you expect? So, all right, you know, time passes. Probably at about 9 months, I said something again, like, he is just not doing the same things as his brother did at that age. And the pediatrician said, well, every kid's not an Olympic athlete. That my older son was probably the other end of the spectrum. He's very athletic, and so things were easy for him. So I said, okay. So when I went back at 15 months, I said, well, he's not walking. And he said, all right, let's send him for physical therapy. So we went to physical therapy, and in 18 months, he hadn't closed the gap. He was walking and his skills had improved, but he wasn't any closer to his peers than he was at 15 months. So then the pediatrician said, well, and this is very experienced, he'd, you know, been in the clinic for 25 years. He said, I'm not really sure what's the matter with him. He said, he doesn't tick the boxes for the typical developmental delays that we see. I want you to see a developmental pediatrician. So he sent me to a developmental pediatrician, and they spend a lot of time evaluating the child in person. So that's an interesting experience. It's a little different than most. And when we were finished, he said, well, I think you need to go get a CK test. I think he has muscular dystrophy. And I didn't know what muscular dystrophy was. I had no experience. So I said, okay. And I walked out. Really not until I went home that night and started to research was I really devastated, because once I looked it up, I was like, oh my God, this is what's wrong with him. So we did the CK test. We were sent to a neurologist. Back in those days, the typical advice that parents received at the first visit from the neurologist is, there's nothing we can do, just go home and love them. And no one wants to hear that. Like, that's crap, right? You need to do something with my 2-year-old. Right. At this point, especially. He's 2. In fact, when we went to make the appointment with the neurologist, the nurse in the office said to me, well, we put him in the category of there's nothing we can do anyway, so we're probably 2 or 3 months out from an appointment. And I was like, are you kidding me? So unbeknownst to her, I had friends of friends who sat on the board for the Children's Hospital. A relative's relative used to be the HR vice president in that particular hospital and was close friends with the CEO. And my pediatrician sat on the medical board at that particular hospital. So by the end of the day, they had the board chair, 2 board members, and the CEO on the phone asking why this kid couldn't have an appointment. So I had an appointment right away. But again, most people don't have those connections. That was just fluky. Right, so the average patient to go in and be told that, that's terrible. And that's another thing that we're actually really working on. We're doing a lot of work this year on language and what does language mean, and how words stay with you, and how important it is to a parent that the practitioner, whomever it is really cognizant of what they say, because those words stay for a long time.
I have to say, it's hard to see, so we learned that he had, my son was like 3.5 when we learned it, right? So it was already hard, but then I feel like the difference wasn't this much, him and another 3 or 4 year olds. As they get older, you know, the physical abilities, you can see that they are lacking a lot of physical, you know, because due to the muscle weakness. It's just that difference, him and his peers, gets larger and larger. And as a parent, or I think from his point of perspective, it's also hard. Then you kind of realize that you're different, right? You're not growing like other kids. Or my kid is 15, but he looks more like a 9 or 10 year old because he's tiny. He's short, he's been on steroids, and, you know, and he still didn't hit puberty. So he still has the baby face. So it's just like those things when he's talking about, and then he's realizing that he's different. He knows his condition, but obviously, you know, he still expects to run every now and then, but even though, you know, he can't. So it's just those things that, you know, kind of, it just slaps you on the face sometimes, you know, okay, this is the reality because your kid is different. He has all these challenges while other kids are becoming more independent.
he's becoming more dependent, right? I think that's the hardest part for parents and also for the kids themselves too. When they were younger, that's, you know, all the 3 or 4-year-old are dependent on the parents. You can just hug them or grab them and pick them up and put it in the car, right? But when your kid is 15, you know, you don't expect that, but this is the reality. You need to help your 15-year-old to get in the car. So those are the things, like, I think that hits, you know, the most sometimes. But at the same time, you're like, okay, this is a person. You don't define a person by their disease, right? After all, they're at least my son, he's cognitively there. All the other behaviors are regular 15-year-olds, you know. So other than him looking a little bit younger, I think it's still it's hard. And I have to say, in the beginning, I think it was harder for me. It takes a while to get used to it. But then again, it's like, what is it called? Unambiguous grief. Like, there is these things, and being stable is a really good thing actually with Duchenne, you know. Things not changing, not progressing in the worst way is a good thing. But if something happens, then you're like, okay, here goes another loss. Like, you know, he was able to do this past year, but now he's not able to do this year. So those kind of things, like he was able to get up from our couch in the living room, but this year, for example, it is really hard. He needs to really hold on to on the side of the couch, and you know, you can see that he's struggling. So those are the things, you know, kind of hits you and brings you back to the reality of the Duchenne. But you kind of think of ways, how can I do this? Okay, I'll get a higher couch or higher bed, you know, those kind of things.
They were starting to look at steroid treatment as a standard of care, which it now is a standard of care. So we decided we would put him on steroids. We decided to go with deflazacort, which was sold in Europe at the time and not available in the States, but we could order it through an FDA mail order program. And he went on deflazacort, and we waited. And Tim had what's called a stop codon error. And there's a company called PTC in New Jersey who had an experimental drug that was to coat the stop sign, so to speak, so that the rest of the protein would be made. So he started in that trial when he was 6. That trial is ongoing, just it's still not an approved drug. It's approved in Europe. It's not approved here, but they're continuing to work with the FDA. And the kids that started on the drug with Tim when Tim was 6 are still on the drug via PTC. So it's called Adelorin now. And we saw a huge improvement, actually, a huge improvement when he started the drug. Then the drug was stopped because there was a dosage issue, and they stopped the trial. And then when he went back on the drug, probably too much time had lapsed, and we never saw the same improvement we saw in the beginning. So one of the keys probably to treating Duchenne is treating children early.
Definitely.
By the time they lose muscle, right?
Yeah, that window, definitely.
Exactly. You can't really get that back. And then the disease just kind of progressed like it typically does. And then you involve the cardiologist and the pulmonologist and the endocrinologist and sometimes a gastroenterologist, and sometimes you need neuropsych because there's a lot of behavioral issues.
So he's not in any clinical trial right now.
Okay.
He's 15. So that's the other thing too. Is some of the clinical trial exclusion or inclusion criteria. You know, it's just age dependent, but also mobility dependent. So my son is 15 and he can still walk. So that puts him somewhere, you know, he's not eligible for anything above 13-year-old because he's walking. And, you know, he's not young anymore for the younger trial. So he's somewhere in between. But he's been on steroids since age 4.
Okay.
He's been on heart medication since like proactively though, you know, like there was nothing wrong, but it's just with the
just in
team.
case.
Right now he's on like bone density Fosamax medication, and he's on 2 heart medication. What else is he on? Oh, and then as I said, as he gets older, you know, when they realize there are problems, I think he was getting a little bit down, and then he had started to have OCD, and you may read about it too. Everybody talks about the physical aspect of it, but I think the kids who have Duchenne are known to have more anxiety, and they know, you know, they can have OCD behaviors. And my son definitely started to have OCD around the sleep and having sleep issues, not being able to fall asleep, but it was more like he just didn't want to sleep. So those are the things. And I think at that point we started Prozac,
Mm-hmm.
fluoxetine. Yeah, so those he's on it. He's on a low dose because I think he got better. And
I think there's a lot of things. It changes your life. I mean, it completely changes the course of your life. So what you envision moving forward is just not what's going to be there. I remember we had just moved right before Tim was diagnosed, and I was sitting on my beautiful staircase and I was crying. My husband's like, "What's the matter?" And I was like, "We're going to have to move and I have to leave my staircase." And he's like, "Of all the things that we're worried about with the sick baby, you're worried about the staircase." But like, it's that kind of just immense change in your life. And then I think it morphs into a real understanding of how important each day is. And so trying to live as much of your life as you can live instead of waiting until later, because you don't really know what later is. So I think that you gain an appreciation of the journey as opposed to only working as a means to the end, because what is the end? So, I mean, I think the positive is that you start to appreciate each day. Certainly the negative is, it's like getting hit over the head with a sledgehammer, and everything that you thought your life was going to look like doesn't look like that anymore, and it never will. And it impacts your entire life. It impacts your family, your parents, your brothers and sisters, your nieces and nephews. Certainly the siblings pay a large price. Friends of the family, it is very impactful that way.
so there's no cure, right now. There are approved treatments by the FDA, exon skipping being one of them. And steroids is a treatment still. So something that will change. And then I think based on the latest research, gene therapy looks very promising. And there are different approaches. One is delivering a microdystrophin by using AAVs. The other approach is actually delivering this CRISPR-Cas, right, to the cells and make their own dystrophin. So, or gene editing, we can call it. So there are, I don't want to say because I'm not really the scientist who is doing the gene therapy, but MDA recently held a conference, a small conference, bringing all the key people, key researchers, clinicians in the gene therapy, right? And it looks like it's a field that has to move forward, and we are pushing for it, but there are problems with it because, first of all, it's a one-time treatment right now. So it's not approved treatment, right? It's in clinical trials. There are a couple of companies who are doing clinical trials, but it's a one-time thing. So when you're as a parent, if I want to sign up my kid for a gene therapy clinical trial, you think twice, because if he gets this and it's not working, that's it, right? He's not going to be eligible for another trial. So I think that's something that scientists or researchers want to look at it and have the option of redosing. Is it possible? Right now, what happens is that when you deliver the microdystrophin with AAV, the immune system, starts reacting, and then you have these antibodies that's towards the AAV. So if you are you cannot be dosed another time with AAV. So I think, that's something that some work has to be done, redosing, and also maybe designing a better microdystrophin where a lot of research is focused on the skeletal muscle, but the kids also have cardiac issues, right? DMD. Not every mutation has the same type of, same level of cardiomyopathy. Some kids start having at age 7, some kids start having late teens. So there is a variation depending on which mutation they have, but still is a major problem. And I feel like it's an area where people or scientists didn't really think much about it because everybody's concentrated on skeletal muscles, but heart muscle is a different kind of muscle. And I feel like gene therapy has recent research shows that, and there was that in the Pfizer trial, for example. So, and it shows that the kid had cardiac problems after the gene therapy, 6th stage of the gene therapy, he died because of a cardiac arrest. So those are the problems I think the field is trying to solve and push it forward. So I'm hoping, researchers will come up with better knowledge of immune system, how it reacts to AAV, and they will be able to design a better delivery system for the AAV, or better system, make the gene editing.
take a breath and give yourself grace. Like none of us can do everything. So do what you can do and make sure you enjoy your son in your life. Don't get so focused on what you can do medically that you forget to go out and have fun.
I guess I go back to when my son was first diagnosed, and then when I reached out to a couple of parents that I could find, their advice was like, okay, this is it. It's hard, but you're not alone in this. And then I guess a couple of parents, when I said I'm a scientist, they were kind of, look, the science is moving. Look at this, look at that, And then I also reached out a neurologist when my son was diagnosed, like one of the, as I said, I live in Boston area, and at MGH back then, I reached out to this neurologist, and then I searched who's known in this field, and I found my son's neurologist, another one in Cincinnati, and then after I talked, and she called me, like I sent her an email and I said, I have these questions and can I talk to you? And then she called me, she asked me about his mutation. So that kind of how you can, as a parent, I think that's really important. Someone, a clinician reaching out to you and talking about it, and kind of, she didn't say this is a good thing, obviously, right? But it's just like that, okay, there are, like we are a comprehensive clinic. We will take care of the problems as they come by. So at least it was good to hear that. And also from other parents saying that, yes, this is not easy. You will have lots of problems, but then there are ways to solve it. And then there are people who you can reach out to, right?
We want to say a word of appreciation to Evram and Ellen, who provided us with thoughtful responses and perspective as parents with a child diagnosed with DMD, but also as professionals who advocate and helps parents and children with DMD. Throughout this project, we were able to learn about different organizations in place for parents with DMD, the different struggles they have experienced in their DMD multidisciplinary journey, and a positive mindset and gratitude these parents have in their everyday lives. Once again, thank you, Evram and Ellen, for sharing your story with us and allowing us to broaden our perspective on DMD.